What is the point of Holy Week? Why is Jesus going to suffer and die on the cross for you and me? And how should we take advantage of that? My brothers and sisters, years ago, I had a good friend. His name was John. And John, I will never forget. He was an All-American athlete. He was 6'5", 210 pounds of muscle. Amazing young man. And John was the story of his day, of his university. He had friends, he had his girlfriends. He had plenty of money and popularity. And John one day, after coming off the football field, felt a little pain in his spine. And it was very difficult to walk all of a sudden. So he, tough guy, walked it off, kept going. And little by little, it became more painful. And after a day of this, he actually couldn't walk anymore. And so finally he decided to go to the doctor, and they checked it out. And it turned out, to his surprise and to his horror, that a spinal tumor had silently wound its way up his vertebrae. Within days, John, this tough, vibrant young man, laid down in his bed at age 25. And he never got up from that bed again. Now, I met John when he was 42 years old. Okay, 42 years old. He'd been in bed since he was 25. Okay, 17 years in bed. Now, I don't know about you, but your first thought might be that this guy was miserable. This guy must have been going crazy. This guy was ready to commit suicide, perhaps, you'd think. John, though, was, to my surprise, and probably to all of our surprise, if you had known his story, was actually one of the happiest men I've ever met. John suffered a great deal. He could barely move. When I met him, he was paralyzed basically from neck down at that point. They couldn't do anything about the spinal tumor. And so, paralyzed, he could, with his finger or two, switch the TV channels, but he couldn't move himself in bed. He had to have nurses move him back and forth. And I was at the hospital an hour before John passed away. And we prayed the rosary together. And his organs were shutting down. And John, even then, was still happy, and he was vibrant. And you know, the amazing thing I'll always remember, besides the vibrance and happiness, was that he offered his sufferings to God with Jesus Christ. And he offered them for vocations, he offered them for the poor, he offered them for other people who suffered, and especially for those who didn't believe in God, who didn't believe in Jesus Christ. John was a man of faith, and I propose to you an example of a living, crucified Jesus. And he had peace, and he had joy, and he had life. And he offered it all for you and me, like our Lord. My brothers and sisters, we're approaching quickly Holy Week. We're approaching the Passion of our Lord. And we know that in this time we reflect on Jesus going with his face set like flint to Jerusalem. And as he told his apostles, I will be scourged, I will be mocked, I will be rejected by the chief of our people, by the elders and the scribes and the Pharisees and others. And I will be crucified. Crucifixion being the worst human torture ever invented by man. The Romans perfected this torture over centuries. Excruciating pain. So painful that secular writers documented at times the Roman soldiers would have to cut out the tongue of the tortured man, because the screams and the blasphemies that were uttered were so horrible to the human ear from the pain that they would have to cut out the tongue. Can you imagine? I don't think I can imagine. It's hard to imagine that. And yet our Lord comes to earth to save us, and he chooses by his own free will. He says, no one takes my life. I have power to lay it down, and I have power. I have the desire, I have the love to lay it down, and the desire and power to take it up again. And he chooses to do it through the worst human torture ever invented. He does it for you. He does it as if you were the only one. And so as we enter into this Holy Week very soon, our Lord invites us not to look at Holy Week, the Last Supper, the trial, the scourging at the pillar, the crowning of thorns, the carrying of the cross, the crucifixion, the last words of our Lord, the laying in the tomb. Our Lord invites us not to look at this as passive bystanders, passive historians, as if we're going to a museum and looking at mummies, saying, look at that, isn't that interesting? No. This week, Holy Week, is a week our Lord invites you, as if you were the only one, as the only one, to go with Him. And not just to go with Him and watch, but to join Him. Remember, He said to you at the beginning of Lent, if you would be my disciple, take up your cross daily. Reject yourself, deny yourself, take up your cross daily, and come, follow me. Come in my footsteps. And what does that mean? Well, it means that our Lord has chosen, amazingly enough, to associate your life, to associate your sufferings. Could be a headache, could be a rough day at work, could be the difficulty of going to school every day. It could be cancer, could be AIDS, could be a tendency or an addiction that you face in your life that's inconsistent with God's plan for your life. And you're fighting it, and yet you still bear the weight and the difficulty of it all. Our Lord wants to associate that suffering with His own. Our Lord wants to give you the opportunity to unite yourself to His suffering and to offer it with Him for the glory of the Father and the salvation of souls. Imagine your life and the difference your life and the meaning you would have if no matter what you suffered in life had depth, had meaning, had purpose. We can always suffer when there's meaning and purpose. The Olympian suffers to achieve through the sacrifice to achieve the gold medal. The athlete is not worried to have diets and workouts to attain that level of success. Even a doctor or a lawyer or a politician or a business leader or a mom, whatever you associate yourself as, to live with excellence is difficult. It's suffering. But when you see why you're doing it, why you're enduring it, it has meaning. You can go forward. Well, all the more powerful and loving when you can do all that with our Lord, for our Lord, and as our Lord did for the salvation of other souls. So I invite you this Holy Week, take advantage. Let it be like no other Holy Week, because this week is a week for you with Jesus. Not someone else, for you with Jesus. Take advantage of the Holy Triduum. Take advantage to live this week reading the Bible, especially John chapter 13 to 21. Read it slowly about the Passion, about the Last Supper, the resurrection. To go to the Mass of the Lord's Supper on Holy Thursday. To go to the celebration of the Passion of the Lord on Good Friday. And to do the Way of the Cross, the Stations of the Cross on Friday. To go to the Easter Vigil or Sunday morning. Our Lord has many graces of His friendship in store for you. And I promise, that's a promise from God, that He has special graces just for you. All it takes is for you to open your heart to that grace. All it takes is your open heart and participation. And let our Lord do His work. Let His heart change your heart and touch your heart. So that will be my prayer for you this Lent, and this Holy Week in particular, that you open your heart to walk with Christ and to experience Him in a deep and personal and passionate way like you never had before. Because that passion and that suffering and that sacrifice is for you, and it has the power to change your life forever. God bless you, and have a very blessed Holy Week, and a happy Easter. God bless you.